A new era of governance is here, predicted by those who govern themselves and to the dismay of those who lacked foresight. Risk management has become a necessity in ensuring that companies don't just stay afloat, but operate and adapt, knowing that any crisis would allow them to transform and not affect their sustainability. Around the world, businesses have taken into consideration the environmental, social, and governance principles as a critical consideration into their strategies. But the outliers outweigh the flexible, and this is no different in our own continent. Having the most diverse population, rich in natural resources, and exporting million tons of precious metals and commodities per year, it's time that Africa takes the forefront in leading the world in a new level of prosperity. However, many issues still persist on our continent, including poverty, crime, gender-based violence, corruption, the mismanagement of precious resources, and low corporate governance. As Africans, we need to recognize the value our continent can provide and evolve our business practices not just for wealth, but for the prosperity of societies and generations to come. Now, we have the tool that is built by Africans for Africa and the globe.
So the ESG GPS model is not just a one-size-fits-all. We want companies not just to go from good to great, but to be built to last. That's all about sustainability.
And has already started shaping companies to become inclusive of the ESG landscape in South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. And now, we look to Mauritius to continue and progress Africa's drive towards sustainability and move Africa towards global alignment to net zero. This is ESG GPS Mauritius. Aloki Mania, and welcome to Africa's drive towards sustainability, ESG GPS Mauritius, the launch of Mauritius's first ever artificial intelligence ESG rating model. Today, we have a strong lineup of keynote addressers of this subject matter that has taken over the globe. I am very pleased to introduce our first keynote addresser, Professor Mervyn King, Chair at Integrated Reporting Committee of South Africa. He will be followed by Julian Tyak, Partner, Risk and Technology Assurance Services at PwC Mauritius. Then, two members from Risk Insights. We have Dr. Abu Baida Shabat, Deputy CEO and the head of the Data Science Lab, along with Kunal Kaulian, Head of ESG Equity Ratings, who will lead this session with the cadence of the ESG GPS rating tool and the current state of the disclosure of ESG. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Risk Insights and the Stock Exchange of Mauritius, for this invitation to speak to you about the ESG factor in corporate reporting. Well, at the beginning of the 21st century, through expedited research, it was realized that the makeup of the market capitalization of companies, only 20, maybe 30% of it was reflected as additives in a balance sheet according to financial reporting standards. The other 20% was made up, the other 80% was made up of the so-called ESG factors. Why? Because this expedited research through the computer age revolution of the 1970s showed that the limited liability companies around the world, including Mauritius, were using natural assets faster than nature was regenerating them, and also that population was growing, so the demand for product was increasing. This caused the United Nations to be concerned, and at the time I was the chairman of the United Nations on Governance and Oversight, and had meetings at the Geneva headquarters of the United Nations with the International Federation of Accountants and other international bodies, and two senators from Massachusetts started speaking about creating guidelines for the preparers of reports on this 80% of value, which was not being reported on, and consequently directors were not discharging their duty of accountability. And so the Global Reporting Initiative was formed, and the initiative shows it was an initiative at the beginning, and guidelines were created as to how to do this. So reporting changed at the beginning of this century. So a lot of companies did the financial report according to IASB standards in Mauritius and in most countries, 144 countries in fact. And then they started doing GRI guidelines. Now the GRI guidelines were based on how did the company make its money? How did it make it in making its product? What were the impacts on its waste, for example? And when the product went out into society, how did it impact on the economy, society, and environment? The three critical dimensions for sustainable development. So that was inside out. And you will see that towards the end of the first decade of the 21st century, we had the seismic event of the collapse of Lehman Brothers, which impacted on limited liability companies throughout the world because it went right through the banking systems. And so it impacted on the financial condition of companies, their balance sheets. It impacted on their operational performance, their income statements and cash flows. It impacted also on their risk profile, their cost of capital. And so suddenly it was realized that sustainability, like a coin, had two sides. Of course, this was an impact on value from the outside in, and not only from the inside out. In looking at this, the United Nations, through its task team called EFRAG, has issued for consultation their sustainability standards disclosures, which are double materiality. They've got inside out and outside in. After the collapse of Lehman Brothers, the Sustainability Accountancy Standards Board was created in San Francisco, which focused on outside in impacts on the company. And they focused on 77 specific industries and developed this outside-in standards. The IIRC, the International Integrated Reporting Council, which was formed to connect the financial and non-financial information, so a board could actually explain it in clear, concise, and understandable language, instead of the user reading the financial report and the sustainability report, which was in technical language and incomprehensible to the majority of users. And the IRC and Sustainability Accountancy Standards Board merged and formed the Value Reporting Foundation. That I became chair emeritus of, and that in turn was acquired by the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation. And they created a whole new body called the International Sustainability Standards Board, which absorbed the outside-in standards of the ISSB. But they developed the concept of interoperability so that if directors thought there was something material from the inside-out impacts, then they would report on it on the basis that it was material, and the test being that the user in reading that might come to a different conclusion, for example, to remain invested in the company or not. And so this mercurial concept of interoperability is still out there. But I say, fortunately, EFRAG and the Technical Readiness Working Group of IFRS and the ISSB and the IASB are talking to try and align those standards. So when Mauritius and every country will over the next couple of years mandate sustainability reporting because of the degradation of our planet and the urgency to try and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, for those who come after us particularly. So the only question is, what standard will Mauritius mandate? But they will mandate sustainability reporting and then the connection between the financial and non-financial information, the integrated report. So thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope my talk has given you a flavor of this moving target on the ESG factor in corporate reporting. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Grateful to Risk Insights for the opportunity to address you on this platform today on a topic that I'm very passionate about and is top of PwC's agenda. Let me start with giving you my high-level overview of how I see things on ESG. Businesses have at last come to the realization that their actions are actually closely linked to the prosperity of our planet. For so long, our fixation on financial returns has, I see it, undermined our ability to respond to the challenges we face around sustainability today. The underlying problem has been very much systemic. Issues of a global nature, such as climate change, geopolitical tensions, and pandemics, are becoming harder to deal with simply because the way we have been thinking about strategy and decision making so far has just not been suited to the nature and scale of these problems. We are now having to deal with some new source of risks that we are simply poorly prepared for, risk that will nevertheless shape the future of our economies and societies for many, many decades to come. As we've all seen, it is in this context that ESG has rapidly taken center stage worldwide. Building long-term resilience into our ecosystems has now become critical. It's very much catch-up time, and we are already late. This increasing pressure on ESG is, however, still coming from a place of fear, as more and more stakeholders are putting pressure on governments and companies to act. Investors, for example, are demanding greater transparency on how their funds are being utilized. But we should not ignore the huge opportunities that all this is creating as we move towards a greener way of life. To this, I will mention the accelerated innovation, and in particular, the super fast digitalization of the way we work, which together with ESG are creating new industries, products, and services. With my work at PwC, I'm seeing this more and more every day. To bring an African context to this, the continent has been desperate for many years now for funding to meet its sustainability goals, as it has experienced low private sector investments and high cost of capital. This is probably why we are seeing a growing number of African countries trying to reform their financial market policies in order to attract ESG-related investments. A recent study I saw recently showed that 17 countries in Africa have introduced such policies. This is compared to 12 just a year ago. So what does all this mean to Mauritius? Firstly, it has to be said that we are a very, very small emitter of greenhouse gases, yet we are expected to be among the worst countries impacted by climate change, mostly in the form of severe weather and rising sea levels. Quoting a recent IMF report, Mauritius faces a significant financing gap to meet its 2030 targets on climate change, both in terms of adaptation and mitigation. Reliance on government funding and external donors alone will not suffice to bridge this gap. In all this, I see a huge opportunity for our capital market to step up and offer this financing. Again, being discussed at COP27 is the contribution in climate financing from developed to developing countries. I hear a figure of 100 billion USD a year being mentioned. When this financing is hopefully mobilized, the countries with the right mechanism in place will benefit, and Mauritius should absolutely be one of them. For example, by positioning itself as a regional hub of choice for financial services related to sustainability, such as education and healthcare projects. To achieve this, however, we will need to build on our existing and already well-recognized national code of corporate governance and make our capital market more ESG friendly to attract and facilitate the flow of funds towards green projects. The most critical step to achieve this for me is to create a trusted environment for sustainable financing. And for this, A recognized national framework on ESG is required. There is significant work to be done at policy level to design this framework. Bringing all stakeholders on the same page will be very challenging, but I believe that many benefits will come out for Mauritius. After having been scattered and inconsistent for many years, sustainability reporting is being streamlined globally. In this respect, the platform provided by Risk Insight will bring to Mauritius a crucial piece of a puzzle, which is data and insights, allowing us to follow how our companies are doing on ESG. Data analytics for me will be the driving force for meaningful change on ESG. PwC issued its global strategy last year, the new equation, which combines technology, innovation, and experience to deliver sustained outcomes to our clients and society while building trust across our value chain. Within the new equation, ESG is a focus area. You probably heard Bob Moritz mention that by 2026, PwC is aiming to create 100,000 new jobs to support our clients on ESG. In Africa and beyond, PwC is pushing for organizations to embed ESG into their decision-making. Each country is, of course, taking its own path on ESG, and depending on its level of preparedness, its maturity level will differ. Accordingly, PwC is adapting to its client needs. Some are still at strategic thinking stage, some are in the middle of transforming their operations, and others have already reached reporting stage. Regardless, our teams are well equipped to help, and our engagements worldwide remain guided by our global strategy to deliver sustained outcome to our clients. In Mauritius, we are still at a very early stage of our ESG journey. Most of our work is working with our clients on awareness and upskilling, for example, on climate-related financial risk and supporting capacity building initiatives. For the clients, although in the minority, we are already helping them transform their business strategy and review their internal operating frameworks. I consider myself very fortunate to be firstly at PwC and be able to deliver such services to my clients. Thank you again to Risk Insight for inviting me today, and I look forward to more collaboration on this crucial issue. And thank you for your attention.
Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the launch of ESG GPS for Mauritius. Change is from the inside out. In an ever-changing world, how well is your business able to pivot and adapt? Business success is no longer measured solely by financial performance. Non-financial data is as important. Having a green mindset, a diverse, forward-thinking workforce, and strong governance is what will set businesses apart. When ESG is placed at the heart of an operation, the result is a future-ready business that will not only have a competitive advantage, but also deliver value for all stakeholders. That is, the people, planet, profit, and principles of good governance. So, what's key here is leadership. So today, as a collective, we are pivoting towards sustainability for Mauritius. Ladies and gentlemen, although ESG is maturing and gaining momentum, it remains complex and imperfect, compounded by the lack of standardization. Most ESG data is embedded in narrative, and it is therefore unstructured, making this difficult for analysts, regulators, asset owners, and all stakeholders to analyze. But today, we have ESG GPS, the first artificial intelligence, or AI, and machine learning tool built for Africa by Africans. Risk Insights has gathered and rated all listed companies on the Mauritius Stock Exchange using ESG GPS. Now let me tell you how this works. Using AI and machine learning, we have been able to collect all voluntary, mandatory, and publicly disclosed information of every listed institution. This data takes into account the laws of the land, as well as the laws that affect the sector, therefore making the rating tool extremely robust from a materiality perspective. The rating of each counter is relative to the country as well as the sector. To augment the data collection process, using natural language processing, or NLP, Risk Insights also accounts for the sentiment analysis of a counter using news feeds. We use computer engineering to gather the empirical data for every materiality factor. Now, disclosure can be manipulated if you have great investor relations team with a big budget. And to mitigate this risk, we have correlated financial performance to disclosure. This ultimately provides stakeholders with the rating for every listed company in Mauritius. Ultimately, using AI, Risk Insights collects all data, matches the TF-IDF narrative to the actual empirical data, and correlates that with financial performance on a dynamic basis. There is complete transparency, consistency, and independence for every listed company on the capital markets. Our ratings are from 1 to 4, 1 being a poor rating and 4 being an excellent rating in relation to the country and sector. We have several products providing the market with this transparency. We have X-Ray, which provides business intelligence on the actual empirical data. We have Rating Watch, that provides sentiment analysis based on news feeds. And finally, we have ESG GPS. Today, Risk Insights rates over 600 companies over 4 major exchanges on the African continent. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Abubaida Shabat, who is the head of the Data Lab, as well as the Deputy CEO of Risk Insights. Abubaida will take you through a high-level overview on the state of ESG disclosure of listed companies on the Mauritius Stock Exchange. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the ESG GPS launch for Mauritius. I am going to give you a synopsis of the state of the ESG disclosure for all companies listed on Mauritius. Mauritius has 95 counters and 10 sectors based on Mauritius classification. We are the only company in the world that has rated the entire Mauritius Stock Exchange. ESG disclosure guidelines has not been adopted for the country, and therefore ESG disclosure is still immature for the market. As my colleague Kunal pointed out, business success will be driven by futuristic companies that takes into account people, planet, profit, and principles of good governance. Companies will have to take into account all stakeholders, which will improve the cost of capital and the cost of fund, and more importantly, conscious leadership. Let me navigate you through the data. The E in the ESG takes into consideration how well an organization acts as a steward of its physical environment, including the use of natural resources. Please note that this synopsis only takes into account the 63 companies that have reported for 2021. 8 counters have reporting outstanding. The largest sectors in Mauritius is financials, which consist of 42 companies. It contributes to over 60% to the exchange and therefore plays a fundamental role in economy. Out of 42 companies, only 5 companies reported on carbon emission, and only 4 companies reported in water consumption. The financial sector is an overseas financial center in Mauritius for Africa. E-reporting is low in the country, an important area to focus. From my slide, it is obvious that environmental reporting is immature for the entire Mauritius market. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Mauritius contributes minimally to CO2 emissions on the African continent. However, in order to attract impact capital, it is paramount for Mauritius to play to this strength. This advantage could assist Mauritius vastly against its African counterparts and other countries that oversees financial center. Social factors debates the Mauritius market disclosure for important social trends. Now, social disclosure takes into account how a company recognizes the well-being of its employee as well as society and disclose this to all of its stakeholders. Why is it important to do so? Social factors provide a competitive advantage in terms of talent management, creating retention, improves brands and competitiveness. It is the human capital that makes a company. Ultimately, the social factors will determine how a company is viewed from an inside perspective by its staff and from an outside perspective in terms of how it contributes to charity and the well-being of society. There are several metrics to determine this information. Which are the best sectors? From the social disclosure analysis, it can be seen that the most of the companies in the financial sector report on their CSR contribution. Most of them have social policies in place, as well as diversity and equality was disclosed. As we have entered into the 4R, being a knowledge-based institution is extremely important. Training and development of employee will create competitive advantage, and from the data, very few companies report on their training and development initiatives. The factors that are depicted on the chart are some of the globally accepted principles of social reporting. In consumer services, which is the second largest sector in Mauritius, 13 companies out of 18 companies reported on their contribution to community, and only 3 companies reported on the staff training, and 7 companies reported on diversity and equality. ESG GPS indicates that in total, that there are more than 200,000 individual employees across the 7 out of the 10 reported sectors for 2021. The majority of the employees are from the financial sector at over 170,000 employees. The average percentage of female employees out of the total employees among all reported sectors is around 16%. This is a relatively low number compared to the rest of African exchanges rated by ESG GPS. Women representation boards and C-suite and management is a strong driver for gender diversity management. There are materiality factors that provide line of sight of the strength of governance that is adapted by leadership. For instance, the board of directors and the C-suite. This slide aims to provide you with a high-level view of certain materiality factors that are reported by Mauritius companies in 2021. The best reporting on governance is in the financial sectors. 38 companies out of 42 companies report on the board size, and 36 companies reported on committee meeting attendance. Board independence are key factors in risk management and represent one of the 3 lines of defense for any listed company. I hope this high-level presentation was enlightening and provide you with an overview on the state of ESG disclosure in Mauritius. For further information on our products and our offerings, here's our website, riskinsight.co.za, or you can email us at info@riskinsight.co.za. ESG GPS is here to navigate Mauritius to sustainability. Our data is based on empirical evidence and, as Kunal mentioned, consistent, transparent, and independent. I look forward to working with you.
Huge congratulations to Risk Insights and Mauritius for the launch of ESG GPS into the country. May the sustainability odds be ever in your favor. Now, I introduce our next keynote address, Sunil Benimaru, CEO of the Stock Exchange of Mauritius, followed by Helle Bank-Jurgensen, CEO of Competent Boards, Global ESG and Climate Certificate and Designation, Alvin Pierthy, Head of Sustainability and CSR Afrasia Bank Limited, Karina Wessels, Executive of Governance, Legal, Compliance and Sustainability, Alex Forbes. Over to you, Sunil.
Thank you for attending the ESG GPS Mauritius launch, and I would like at the very outset to thank Risk Insights for inviting me to participate in this launch. At the recent COP27 gathering, it came out very clearly that island economies tend to be among the greatest losers to the disastrous impact of climate change. And in a number of studies at the global level, Mauritius as an island economy has ranked regularly among the top 10 most vulnerable countries to climate change. And this is why the Mauritian national policymakers have placed sustainability and the fight against climate change among their top priorities. And this is also why the Stock Exchange of Mauritius decided in 2015 to bring its contribution to the national agenda of placing sustainability among the top priorities of the exchange. And in 2015, we launched the SEM Sustainability Index, which we call SEMC. And what is SEMC all about? Well, it is an index which tracks the price performances of those listed companies on the Stock Exchange of Mauritius, which are championing the cause of sustainability and which are also actively pursuing the goal of triple bottom line, people, protecting people, planet, and achieving profits at the same time. What we've seen since we launched the SEM Sustainability Index is that it has attracted the interest of a lot of investors, because this index, which started with an initial market capitalization of 93 billion at launch in September 2015, has today reached nearly 200 billion Mauritian rupees. We have also noted that many of our listed companies are actively engaged in the ESG practices and also actively ensuring, especially those that are a part of the SEM Sustainability Index, that they are fully compliant with the Global Reporting Initiative criteria in terms of sustainability. What is, however, missing at this point in time is that those companies that are very much involved in sustainability practices, in ESG practices, are, however, not necessarily reflecting these practices in their annual reports and in their financial reporting on an annual basis. Why is that the case? I think there is an explanation. The main reason, in my view, is that there is today an absence of a well-accepted, well-defined, and aligned framework with international best practice on which these companies could rely on when they decide to report on their ESG practices. In fact, to highlight what I'm saying, I just want to make a parallel with how Mauritian listed companies have been reporting on their governance practices. If we just move some 10 to 15 years back, many of our listed companies were already involved in good governance practices, but their reporting was somehow scanty. Why? Because there was no code on corporate governance on which these companies could rely on to actually drive them in terms of their reporting on good governance practices. But since Mauritius adopted the National Code on Governance, there's been a substantial improvement in the reporting standards of our listed companies on their good governance practices. And I'm convinced that should Mauritius tomorrow come forward with a framework on ESG, which is aligned with best international practice and which is widely accepted, I'm pretty sure that we will see a momentous change in the reporting standards of our listed companies on their current E and S practice. And I'm confident that, our companies are very conscious that in today's ESG conscious, investment conscious world, many of the investors are placing a premium on those companies that not only are very good in practicing ESG, but that are also good in reporting ESG practices in a structured and exhaustive manner. I thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone. My name is Helle Bing Jorgensen, and I am the CEO and founder of Competent Boards, educating board of directors, investors, business professionals, executives from all over the world to be confident in making the best ESG, environment, social governance, and climate decisions for their companies, the stakeholders, our societies, and yes, their own careers. I've been asked to talk about the responsibility of competent boards and the meaning of this stewardship for the future of governance. But before I do so, I want to warmly congratulate you on the launch of ESG GPS for Mauritius. I wish I was there in person with you. This launch is such an important step, as this is, if I understand you correctly, the fourth African country exchange where your team has gathered all ESG disclosure using machine learning and AI. Very well done. Warm congratulations on that. And I tell you, we cannot make an informed decision without being informed. Well, that sounds so simple. Yet every day we make decisions that impact the world, our own lives, and others without always thinking about the impact. So why have you asked me to talk about the responsibilities of competent boards and the meaning of this stewardship for the future of governance? Well, I expect it is because it is essential to have the board and leadership on board. I serve on many different roles, including at the World Economic Forum, I'm expert in terms of leadership and governance and emerging multinationals. I also serve on the ESG Exchange, Professor Mervyn King, where we look to see how we can start having companies compete on what they report instead of how they're reporting. And your work is so important in that as well. We are also right now in a time where we have seen leaders meet for the COP27 discussion in Egypt, discussing climate action, and actually especially for the African continent. We will have leaders, and I'm speaking right now to you from Canada, we will have leaders coming to Canada in December to discuss biodiversity. And I and many other leaders will gather at the World Economic Forum in Davos in January to discuss all of these issues we're living in right now. But we need to do more than discuss. We need action. Regulations and key stakeholders are putting an increased focus on the responsibilities of the board of directors, of leaders, of us, and of the investors as well. The board of directors not only hires and fires the CEO, but is also the guardian of the company's culture and the long-term value creation. They are the stewards of the future, to mention the title of my book, Stewards of the Future, A Guide for Competent Boards. As we transform businesses into a new reality where companies and the boards face unstable geopolitical situations, climate change, societal changes, we need not only data and information, but also wise leaders. We need ESG and climate competent leaders and board members. In this fragmented world we live in, we need leaders that have a mindset of sustainable growth, that can see how all the environmental, social, and governance factors are interrelated and can cooperate and partner to reach for the world, well, the world we not only want, but the world we need to give to our children and grandchildren. The road to a sustainable future is not only paved by good intent, it is paved by action. And to do that, we need the road to be a sustainable future. We need the road to be paved by education. And as well, of course, all of the information and data. But without the education, I don't think we are going to be able to use and value the data. So when we educate leaders from all over the world, we see cooperation across borders. We see the confidence, and we see human beings caring not only for their companies of today, but also the companies tomorrow, their stakeholders, their society, and yes, their children and grandchildren. I hope that you will be such a leader. I hope that you will be a steward for the future, a steward that will make wise decisions, a steward that is a competent board member, a steward that is ESG and climate competent, and think about the consequences of your actions, not only for tomorrow, but in the long run. Again, a very, very warm congratulations on this very important step. Congratulations to you all.
Good morning, all. It is an absolute privilege to be among you today, and I would like to thank the Risk Insight team for giving me the opportunity to provide some perspective on the ESG agenda within the banking sector and the outlook of sustainable finance in Mauritius. As a sustainability professional, my focus will be mainly on the environmental and social aspects. It is undeniable that the integration of environmental and social factors in business decision-making is becoming the new normal. This requires a structured, process-based approach anchored in continuous improvement across three aspects. The first one is compliance and risk management. Secondly, it is our ability to seize opportunities. And thirdly, it's engaging our stakeholders in our sustainability journey. On the compliance and risk management front, the first milestone in terms of E&S framework in the banking sector was the creation of the Equator Principles in 2003. The Equator Principles is a risk management framework adopted by financial institutions for determining, assessing, and managing environmental and social risk in project financing. The IFC Environmental and Social Performance Standards, together with the interpretation note on financial intermediaries, eventually became the reference for banks engaged in fostering sound environmental and social practices in project finance. This includes the adoption of an exclusion list whereby projects which may significantly impact the environment and society are not financed. International regulations have also been progressing very fast. Over the last few years, the EU regulatory framework has been significantly strengthened. For instance, we have a Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, the EU Taxonomy Regulation, and the EU Green Bonds Regulation, and the list goes on. In Mauritius, in June 2021, the Bank of Mauritius issued its guide for the issue of sustainable bonds in Mauritius. In December 2021, the FSC also published its guidelines to set out the legal and supervisory framework surrounding the issuance and listing of corporate and green bonds. In April 2022, the Bank of Mauritius issued its guidelines on climate-related environmental financial risk management. to enable banks to be in a better position to identify the risks and opportunities arising from a transition to a low carbon and more circular economy. In this vein, with greater awareness from consumers, policymakers, and investors, the demand for stronger disclosure on ESG continues to increase. We can expect ESG frameworks to become more and more prescriptive and embedded in business decision making. And it is obvious that banks, corporates at large, who are proactive and transform these transition challenges into opportunities will benefit from a first mover advantage. For example, financing the energy transition is particularly important for the emerging markets. As part of a nation's efforts to meet its nationally determined contributions, the NDC, Mauritius has committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2023. And it has been estimated that this will require a funding of $6.3 billion. To meet this demand, banks must adapt their offering. Green projects are often characterized by longer payback or return on investment. And to ensure these projects are financially viable, trade-off is necessary both on the demand and supply side. A plethora of sustainable financing solutions are emerging, such as green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, or blended finance. At Afrasia, although we are at the beginning of our journey, we have adopted a diligent, holistic, and forward-looking approach in our way to tackle ESG matters. Our objective is to be an actor of change, a solution provider to participate in the transition to a low-carbon and socially inclusive economy. Regarding the implementation of CRE framework, we are putting much emphasis on establishing the right governance structure to ensure top-down commitment and ensure its integration across all departments. We have adopted a business exclusion list with prohibited and restricted lending on activities, and we are currently working towards the implementation of a full-fledged environmental and social management system, including environmental and social assessment of our credit portfolio and ENS due diligence in project financing. In terms of offering, in October 2019, Afrasia launched its first green project, the Green Car Loan, with the aim to encourage our clients to adopt a car with lower environmental impact. And since we have disbursed more than 150 million rupees. Through the CNREF 3 bis partnership with Agence Française de Développement, Afrasia now provides green loan facilities to finance climate change mitigation projects as well as adaptation projects. Our objective is to enable companies and individuals to invest in equipment and innovative green technologies. In August 2022, following a screening process, Afrasia received its nomination letter to support our application as a Green Climate Fund direct access entity. Furthermore, engaging with our stakeholders has always been a key focus of our sustainability agenda. Afrasia Bank created its foundation 6 years ago to foster its community engagement across 3 areas of focus: education, health, and environment. Moreover, engaging our employees through meaningful activities that help towards environment conservation and tackle social issues through the various projects of its foundation is essential. Afrasia is also a founder member of the United Nations Global Compact Local Network for Mauritius and the region. Along this journey, the difference between success and failure often lies in our ability to assess our environmental and social performance, whether it is our own performance or the performance of our credit portfolio or the investment solutions that we offer. However, data availability and data quality remain the greatest challenge that we currently face. It is vital to be able to assess where we are, to identify where we want to go and how we are going to reach there. Consequently, we believe ESG GPS can indeed be a game changer and help ESG reach its cruising speed. To conclude, future-proofing the livelihood of mankind requires the commitment and actions of all, whether it is government, the corporate sector, or individuals. We all need to be change makers and actively make a difference.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this momentous occasion, and congratulations to Risk Insights on the launch of the ESG GPS for Mauritius. At Alex Forbes, our promise to clients, business partners, investors in Southern Africa is to build a future that we can all connect with. Getting involved in a transformative event like this is part of executing on that promise. As a multi-manager, we believe we can better attain our goal of achieving consistent and responsible investment outcomes when ESG factors are considered in an asset manager's investment process. Now, in responding to the question as a lawyer, I of course need to start off with a disclaimer that I'm not an investment professional, but I do believe that sometimes that's a good vantage point from which to explore opportunities and risks. So, from an opportunity perspective, I believe asset managers as stewards of financial capital have a significant role to play in influencing change towards more sustainable business practices. And this not necessarily through exclusion, but especially in the context of a just transition through engagement. Optimizing on this opportunity can be as basic as ensuring the consideration and analysis of ESG factors form part of the investment decision-making process, like ESG due diligence or investment principles, or advancing to fully integrating ESG factors into the manager's value proposition and even into their organizational purpose in order to increase their competitive advantage. Depending on the approach taken, a risk may be managing the potential consequences of positions taken relative to benchmarks based on their belief system, but also as basic as deep ESG experience and skills and the cost associated of attaining those. But of course, critically important, the risk associated with access to reliable, transparent, and relevant data, and data that confirms true transformation and value creation, rather than merely ESG reporting for compliance sake or greenwashing. But the biggest risk, in my view, is probably doing nothing in response. To also look at it through a different lens, from the perspective of an issuer, in engaging with asset managers over several years on ESG issues, is of course the risk, or perhaps from an issuer's perspective, the frustration associated with the lack of consistent views on ESG best practice. And although we shouldn't be driven by regulation to change, the clarity and standardization that some regulation would bring into the broader ecosystem could be hugely beneficial in comparative analysis and indicating the expected direction of travel for companies. I really look forward to the role that Risk Insights will play in this ecosystem, and I wish you all of the best for the launch and good luck to the Mauritian Exchange.
Such remarkable insights to ESG and the state of disclosure and the journey that is ahead of us all. As a society, we continue to evolve, progress, and grow in a manner that is both astonishing and worrisome. Today, there are 8 billion people on Earth, and therefore, we need to continue to be sustainable, to ensure that we have a planet that not only survives, but thrives. I am now going to introduce our next keynote addressers. Mehul Bhatt, Chief Strategy and Sustainable Development Executive, Rogers & Company, accompanied with Jürgen Boyd, former Financial Services Conduct Authority Regulator, and the Chair of the Mauritius Independent Ratification Committee, IRC Risk Insights. And for our closing remarks, we have an address by the CEO of Risk Insights, Andrei Bogdanov.
Thank you so much, Risk Insights, for this invitation at the ESG GPS launch in Mauritius. My name is Mehul Bhatt, and I'm the Chief Strategy and Sustainable Development Executive at Rogers & Company. Rogers & Company is an investment holding company based out of Mauritius, and this year is celebrating 123 years of existence, which means that sustainability is extremely important to us and is a part of our DNA. In today's session, I'm going to try to focus on telling you how we practice ESG at Rogers and why we believe it's important. I'm going to focus on three things. The first thing is ESG for us is important because it is the right thing to do. We don't do ESG only because our customers want it, our investors want it, but because we believe that ESG is absolutely important to this world and to Mauritius. Mauritius is a small island. It's one of the most vulnerable places to be as we see the world's climate changing very fast. We believe that if we do not act, the climatic changes and the resulting social changes will impact Mauritius extremely negatively. As a responsible player on the island for over 120 years, we believe that it's our responsibility to do this right. So that's the first thing. We do ESG because it's the right thing to do. Secondly, we see ESG with two lenses. We see it with the risk lens and we see it with the opportunity lens. When we think about ESG and the risks therein, you can think of many risks associated with that. There would be some which would be resulting from the climatic changes. So the beaches where we have the hotels depleting and us having to spend a lot of money getting them back. The corals around the hotels that we have are today quite damaged, and this means that tourism, which is so important to this island and to our own business, is starting to suffer because of the lack of marine life and the lack of live corals in the water, and this is a challenge. There are other financial risks like the potential adoption of carbon taxation in Mauritius, which would completely change the way we look at our financial accounts and the use of carbon. So with all these risks, we need to focus on it. But also we think it's a fantastic opportunity going forward because all the transition that the world needs today and Mauritius needs today in order to transition to a low carbon world means that for all the different sectors that we operate in, be it tourism, hospitality, travel, logistics, all of these segments will need to undergo a transition in order to participate in a low carbon economy going forward. And we're very excited about that. In order to make use of our resources and find out how would we transition, in 2021, we worked with Boston Consulting Group in order to figure out how we could ensure our businesses take advantage of this transition economy. After a lot of work, we focused on 4 green ventures, and we decided to start a number of projects under these 4 green ventures in order to make sure that our businesses are able to transition into a low carbon economy. The first one was ecotourism. The second one is nature-based solution. The third one is regenerative agriculture. And the fourth one is energy transition. For all these 4 green ventures, we have a number of projects going on, which are completely linked to the businesses that we're part of. The third and the final point that I wanted to stress today is that we believe as one of the leading players on the island, we have the responsibility to make sustainability more sustainable. Today, it is not sustainable. It is more expensive and it's more difficult today to do the right thing and vis-a-vis doing the wrong thing. So it's easy to take power from the grid to run your businesses, which is 80% non-renewable, vis-a-vis creating your own power in order to run your businesses. We are part of the sustainability index of Stock Exchange of Mauritius, for example, and we put in a lot of efforts to be a part of it. But today, the resultant benefits that need to come through the right reduction in cost of capital and the recognition of our efforts, and that resulting in a lower cost of capital, easier access to capital for green projects is not truly available. Access to green finance, though it's available, the amount of effort that goes into accessing that far outweighs the benefits that come from it. So I believe that all of us, the public sector, the private sector, and organizations like Risk Insights have the responsibility to create an ecosystem which makes sustainability more sustainable. It is easier said than done, but we all need to do it. Finally, Rogers, as a business, has committed to a net zero target by 2050. We hope that it is going to be sooner than that. And we believe that we are able to make a positive difference to the world and to Mauritius. I believe in this particular event, it would be very exciting to see how the different players could get together to create an environment where doing the right thing from an environmental perspective, from a social perspective, from the governance perspective, is actually easier and more profitable to achieve. Thank you for that.
Thank you to Misho Kope for the kind introduction and a very warm welcome to all the attendees to this very important occasion as we launched the Risk Insights ESG GPS rating tool for companies listed on the Mauritius Stock Exchange. Thank you to Risk Insights for the honor of serving as the IRC chair for Mauritius, and congratulations to Mr. Sunil Benimadu, CEO of the Mauritius Stock Exchange, on his leadership in making the decision to subject counters on the exchange to ESG ratings, a contributory step in Africa's drive towards sustainability. The social impact of the 2008 global financial crisis was a wake-up call for policymakers and regulators of the financial markets. And this resulted in the need to identify gaps in financial regulation that may have contributed to the crisis. One of the significant gaps identified was a critical role that credit rating agencies played in financial markets. These were service providers whose ratings directly impacted the markets, but who operated totally unregulated and unsupervised. Well, as you no doubt know, this regulatory gap was closed soon, and jurisdictions across the globe introduced robust regulatory frameworks for credit rating agencies. As a former financial markets regulator, I envisage sometime in the near future a similar regulatory response to ESG rating agencies. Today, with the world's focus increasingly on climate change and sustainability, ESG or non-financial data is gaining more significance in financial markets. Our current cohort of future leaders are not paying lip service to sustainability and will in future no doubt make issues around the impact of ESG an important part of their decision making. We see the onward march of policymakers introducing responses to the sustainability crisis, and likewise, financial regulators and supervisors are focusing their attention on the importance of ESG in investment decision making. So, having regard to the fact that the company's investability will in future be impacted by its ESG rating, I foresee a direct regulatory impact, where financial regulators will bring this industry under their regulatory watch, as was the case with the credit ratings agencies just a few short years ago. The ESG GPS ratings tool will provide companies on the Mauritius Stock Exchange with the ability to plan for ESG transformation, and will assist companies work towards a sustainable future through conscious leadership and conscious capital, through transparent disclosure to all stakeholders. I thank you all for your time and trust you will enjoy the rest of today's launch. Thank you very much.
Bonjour and epikaya to ESG GPS Mauritius. Thank you for joining Risk Insights virtually across the globe to make this launch special. It's my pleasure to have led the Risk Insights team to deliver ESG GPS to Mauritius. This vision of sustainability using data analytics and empirical evidence for Africa to leapfrog remains key to the founder of Risk Insights. COP27 has focused on all countries' responsibility to reduce emissions and dealing with the technical and funding support for developing nations. It is our responsibility as Africa to ensure we are sustainable and not left behind. Our requirement and change that is needed will depend on the empirical data. For the planet to survive and people to have sufficient natural resources, gender equality to be built forward, and governance to move beyond compliance, it will be imperative for leaders in the capital markets across the globe to work together with governments to champion ESG and sustainability. This new era will determine the hearts of leadership and the authenticity to lead with purpose. I'm Andrei Bogdanov, CEO of Risk Insights, and I invite you to join the ESG GPS orbit. Thank you.
Our planet's population will cross a new threshold. The 8 billionth member of our human family will be born. This milestone puts into perspective what this climate conference is all about. How will we answer when baby 8 billion is old enough to ask?
What did you do for our world and for our planet when you had the chance?
We all came here together for one sole purpose. That is to enhance the collective global response to the most existential threat in our lifetime, climate change. Today, here in Sharm el-Sheikh, we established the first ever dedicated fund for loss and damage.
We have the collective capacity to transform. We're in the country that built pyramids. We know what it is to put a man on the moon, and now we put in rover on Mars. We know what it is. I ask the people of the world, and not just the leaders, therefore, to hold us accountable and to ask us to act in your name to save this earth.
I give you the examples of my aunties, of my cousins, of my grandmothers who are on the ground there, running after the cattle, after the agriculture or fishing. They're always taking the right decision because they wanted to ensure that the next year their children get food. Work with those women. Maybe they do not know how to write or read. Maybe they do not know how to fill the Excel sheet, but they are the master of the nature. They know how to protect their nature.
Duty bearers, kindly take up your game.
إن الوقت يداهمنا ونهاية هذا العقد الحاسم باتت على بعد سنوات قليلة. حان الوقت، وقت العمل والتنفيذ.